The last couple of years, the kind of work I've done has, for me, been some of the most important I've ever done, through looking at the early beginnings of accounting in Mesopotamia as clay tablet accounting, and trying to make sense of what kind of writing this was, because people will say it's proto-writing or sort of a first form of almost writing. And then it struck me, well, no, it's not. It's actually writing. This is the first form of writing, but as writing, it can only do certain things, because accounts always just name things and then count them. Which, when you look at it more closely, and it's true in ancient clay tablet accounting, and it's true in modern financial management, cost accounting, all forms of accounting, you name things first, and once you've named them, you name them in a way that they're countable. That's what accounting has to do, because it always has any modern account set out in an alphabetic culture where we would tend to read from left to right. We'll have the naming signs on the left, the assets, the liabilities, the categories, or forms of cost, or whatever it may be. Profits, cash flows, loan flows, funds flows as they call them. All of these things will be set out with naming categories on the left and counting categories on the right. Then when we were looking at this, it struck us, somebody was talking about it and said, those very earliest clay tablet accounts in Mesopotamia, we don't know what language they're in. We can speculate it's Babylonian, which is the language that is spoken about 500, 600 years later, but we don't know. And the reason is because there are no verbs. There is no means of establishing a background against which these texts just name and count of other literate work, because there isn't any. So that was when it struck me, first of all, that instead of calling this proto-writing, it's writing. And then thinking about the fact of it as this sort of writing, which names and counts, is it's not speakable in the sense that a narrative text is. You can read it silently, back to my original point about the silent reading, or you can read it aloud. These texts, you can, as somebody has said, you can verbalize them, but you can't read out an account in a way that will enable anybody to make sense of what the entries in the accounts are and what the overall position is. You have to engage with a visual encounter to read it. And then it suddenly struck me, so they actually, in all of these cultures, from Mesopotamia, Egypt, Assyria, Judaism, China, India, wherever writing appeared, there would always be some form of accounting. And to make sense of that, you have to read it silently. Actually, there's a reason then, beyond just restoring the word of the author who speaks something, you are differentiating real writing, as we still say today on the whole, from this other writing, which is only instrumental or for purposes of stewardship or governing or managing. There's a real difference, and that only struck me since I've been here in Nantes, the IEA, as we say in English, the IEA. And so that has been a long answer to the fact that you asked me, how did I end up doing accounting? Well, I ended up doing accounting because I was pursuing the problems that I thought was always considering about learning, how we learn. And that led me towards studying examinations, was one thing I studied. The beginning of modern examinations, where we write, and we typically now write in a time-constrained way. We have a certain number of questions, and we will typically be given some kind of numerical mark or grade for what we write. And as far as one can tell, nobody ever took such examinations until late in the 18th century. There's a version that starts here in France, in the Grande École, still under the sovereignty of the French kings by the 1760s. That will be formalized in the École Polytechnique from 1796, and it takes a very particular form. Very quickly, as you will know if you have learned and grown up in France, we get national level exams for people to possibly enter the École, which are sat everywhere simultaneously in a very French way, and the results are evaluated on terms of your marks, and the best people will be offered places. Nothing like this anywhere that we know in the history of the world, including in China, where there is 2,000 years of formal written exams, which of course need to be written because there's one script but multiple spoken languages using that script. But there's no numerical grading. All of the evaluation, the formal evaluation, is through qualitative means. This is very good, this is really excellent, this is acceptable. And as a result, unsurprisingly perhaps, the families of those who are part of the imperial city aristocratic bureaucracy in Peking, as we would have called it back then, tends to end up being the next generation of imperial bureaucrats in Peking. And the families of the regional bureaucrats tend up to be the next generation of the regional administration, and so on, because you don't have numerical grading.